Hi, I'm Austin Cruz with Texas Right to Life. As a pro-life advocate, I'm always asked various questions about life issues. Therefore, I'm constantly having to defend my stance. After many conversations with those who agree and don't agree with me on these issues, as well as those who know nothing about the issues, I have come to realize the importance of educating oneself in order to not only defend a stance for life, but also to educate others about the importance of the issue. One question that is at the heart of the abortion issue is, when does human life begin? This question should always begin any discussion of abortion, for if the product of fertilization is not a human life, then abortion is justifiable just like any other surgery. So, when does human life begin? Well, human life begins at fertilization. Now you may be asking, who exactly says this? Well, crazy pro-lifers do, as we know. Know-nothing politicians, as well as many religious leaders like the Pope. They all attest this belief. Now, to many, these don't sound like the most credible people. I mean, what would they know? However, many medical textbooks and science reference works support this claim that life begins at fertilization. Books such as Dr. Bradley Patten's Human Embryology, Dr. Keith Moore's The Developing Human, Clinically Oriented Embryology, Biological Principles in Modern Practice of Obstetrics, and The Atlas of the Body, just to name a few. All of these reach the consensus that life begins at the unification of the sperm and egg, or, simply put, fertilization. These are not hypotheses or theories, but rather conclusions based on scientific fact. Doctors from all around the world and professors from schools like University of Colorado Medical School, University of Pennsylvania, University of Descartes, and even some professors at local universities like Rutgers and Harvard have attested that life begins at fertilization. Even some of the most prominent scientists and professors have affirmed and testified to this claim. Scientists like Dr. Jerome Lejeune, who discovered the chromosomal pattern of Down syndrome, testified to the U.S. Senate that, after fertilization has taken place, a new human being has come into being. He went so far as to clarify that it is no longer a matter of taste or opinion, not a metaphysical contention, but it is plain experimental evidence. In fact, with the advancements in research and through the use of technology like ultrasounds, it has become even more evident that these claims are true. With many physicians, biologists, and scientists agreeing that life begins at fertilization, it is clear that we have a scientific consensus. But let's say that, despite the scientific consensus, you still do not believe that life begins at fertilization. Well, if the science and research just don't cut it for you, then we shall try a more basic approach. First, let's take a distinction between living and non-living things. Now, when it comes to living things, many would divide living things into three categories: vegetative, animal, and human. But despite these distinctions, all three of these categories share the most basic independent capabilities of life, which are growth, self-replication or reproduction, and repair. So, these three capabilities are all inherent to all living creatures. A non-living thing such as a rock or a building can do none of these things. Plants, animals, and humans all grow and move themselves toward a state of physical perfection and maturity. A rock does not. It stays in its present form and cannot change any part of itself. Plants, animals, and humans all have the capabilities of reproducing themselves and therefore create offspring. A rock can be broken up and made into even smaller rocks, but this is obviously not the same as reproduction, as the integrity of the original rock is damaged and it can't do this on its own either. A plant, a puppy, and a child's body all heal and repair themselves when it's damaged. When a rock is chipped, it remains chipped. No one would ever claim that a rock is a living thing, and it is clear that there is a distinction between living things and non-living things. Living things have the ability to do the things listed. Non-living things don't. If death is the absence of life in a living thing, then once death has occurred, the living thing becomes a non-living thing. This is why plants, animals, and humans no longer grow, repair, or reproduce themselves when they are dead. So, now that this distinction has been made, let's see how the newly formed zygote fits into these categories. Growth. Well, if growth is the activity whereby a living thing moves itself toward a state of physical perfection or maturity, then simply by looking at the end product of fertilization, no one could deny the tremendous growth that the zygote goes through in order to finally reach the child that we welcome into the world. It starts from a small 120 micrometer zygote and changes into a 20-inch baby resting in your arms. It could not have reached this stage had the zygote not been alive from fertilization and therefore been able to will itself to grow. Self-replication reproduction. It is through mitosis that the zygote reproduces itself. About a day after fertilization, the zygote begins to divide and becomes a multi-celled embryo. By 4 or 5 days, the zygote has divided into about 100 cells and is what we call a blastocyst. The zygote would not have been able to replicate itself had it not been alive. Not to mention, all of this begins to happen before implantation in the uterus. Even though this event begins to take place hours after fertilization, all the preparations for cell divisions are already underway as the modified nuclei of the recently joined sperm and egg move toward each other and eventually join. Now, repair. When a cell wears out and dies, the embryo has a capability of reproducing itself in order to replace and repair the gap left by the dead cell. Like growth, through the repair, the living thing moves itself toward physical perfection. All three of these things could not be done unless the zygote was a living thing that was able to grow and move itself toward being able to reproduce itself, and be able to reproduce itself in order to continue to grow and repair. None of this could take place if the life did not begin at fertilization, and thus the zygote was not a living thing. Even more than just a simple human cell, it is a cell with all the properties of a fully complete, albeit immature, human organism, according to Dr. Maureen Condé. The zygote acts immediately and decisively to initiate a program of development that will, if uninterrupted by accident, disease, or external intervention, proceed seamlessly through formation of the definitive body. This coordinated behavior is the very hallmark of an organism. So, it would seem that not only do scientists, professors, textbooks, and medical reference works, all which are way more learned in the subjects of embryology and biology, attest themselves that human life begins at fertilization, but it would seem that the basic logic shows us that it does too. So, human life does begin at conception.